We have breaking news. ABC has just announced here that they will be preempting the very well-known show Jimmy Kimmel Live indefinitely. That's confirmed by ABC, and it comes at a very tense time with many of the issues we've been covering tonight. There was a backlash on the right because Jimmy Kimmel, after the Charlie Kirk shooting, made the statement that he viewed, quote, new lows with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them, and with everything they can to score political points from it, end quote. I've just read part of what Jimmy Kimmel had said, which includes what sounds like an inaccurate reference to the shooter. We've followed, of course, that case closely on this broadcast. Andrew Weissmann, DOJ and FBI veteran, is here with me. And I kind of want to start with saying this is a pretty big piece of news when you look at the backlash or punishment of speech, something we've been covering. Right. Also, I would say in a news broadcast, if that were on ABC, you would be probably expected to issue corrections or deal with any material that, deliberately or not, over time became inaccurate, right? I don't actually have the exact date of that statement. I just wanted to let viewers know that. And the FCC leader under Donald Trump had also publicly called for this outcome. So there's been both public but specific government pressure. Your reaction to this news?
Well, one, it's worth taking a pause because we will learn more about exactly what the statements are and sort of how this came about. When I hear this, I divide it very much as you said. What has the government done versus what has a private actor like ABC done? So first, with respect to the government, that's where it's exactly the conversation we were just having with Katie. The government needs to be really respectful of different viewpoints, even when you think that what is being said is inaccurate or deplorable or both. And so that, to me, is the more problematic thing, where you'd want to know exactly what were they doing, because you really are not supposed to engage in sort of viewpoint discrimination. Now, a private actor is a very different story. The private actor is entitled to voice their opinions and what they have to say. But a company can also have certain, restrictions on what they do. But again, news organizations, they both have to be accurate. They have to be fair. They, as you know, from time to time will issue retractions and corrections. But also, news organizations should be the first to be defending the First Amendment.
Yes, and while we are just getting this is brand new. Yep. We know that Brendan Carr, the FCC chief, had talked about this and talked about potentially using government power and fines. He said they really should pull Kimmel. We've been covering what has been both the widespread condemnation of the terrible political violence connected to the Kirk shooting. At least the governor and others have discussed it in that manner. That case goes forward. But then you have the fact that Donald Trump has agitated against Jimmy Kimmel for years around the Colbert ending of that show, which the parent company said was a business financial decision. Trump darkly posted Kimmel is next. They have been feuding for years. And so even for those who might be very justifiably concerned about any statement or misstatement about that violence or Kirk, how do you view this from the oversight perspective of whether or not this has to also be reviewed for whether the government was trying to do the political bidding of the president to get rid of a critic?
Yeah, well, look, CEG Lisa Cook, where that is exactly what she is saying, which is that she is being targeted so that he can control the Fed. I do think that it is important for the news to be able to cover whether somebody is politicizing a tragedy. And there may be a time and place for that discussion. It may not be appropriate to do right at the moment it is happening, because it is a tragedy, and that it should maybe not be the first thing that you cover. But that is, if it is happening, that is something that does have to be covered. And so it really can't be that you are in the government calling on sanctions because you simply don't want to be criticized. That is core to the First Amendment.
And to kind of narrow in on what you're saying, you're talking about what in the law would be a pretext. that you have a politician who's gone after a critic for years, and then something else happens and is being used or misused. But again, the involvement today, very publicly, of the FCC, of the Federal Communications Commission, which has has oversight of these broadcasting networks, that's supposed to be for things other than the president silencing critics, right? I mean, that's not the FCC's official role.
So in terms of pretext, let's just take it back to your show tonight, where we started by talking about Kash Patel. There are many people who listened to that, I'm sure, who said, I think what he said was false. And some people may have thought it was deliberately false. So where is the government outcry over that? And so when you're seeing this as outcry over person A, but not person B, and person B happens to be, your ally, but person A is your enemy, this is not rocket science to know what is going on. And frankly, Donald Trump is very open about sort of weaponizing the levers of power.
I'm curious, both in your role as a lawyer, but also as an intelligent person and around these worlds, what you think that the early big pressures have been on influential figures in entertainment. In Colbert, even though they stipulated it was for a different reason, but Trump was very vocal against him, and what looks to be tonight about Kimmel. What does that tell us?
So I'm going to tell you a very quick story. When I had lunch with my parents and I asked them about the McCarthy era, Joseph McCarthy,
Sure.
and I said, compare that, living through that, and living through Trump 1.0. And they said that 1.0 was better because at least then there were people speaking up and you didn't feel alone, and that there was a real sense of the First Amendment and you weren't terrified, and it wasn't this idea of silencing. And that is the thing that we talked about on this show, and we've talked about it before, is that slipping into the use of fear and the levers of power to recapitulate a really hideous point in our history in the 1950s of the Red Scare and what was done to people in Hollywood, in academia, in government. And that is the concern, is that you're going to see that kind of silence that is being used through government power.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. When Stephen Colbert announced that his late-night show was being canceled back in July, the president of the United States, Donald Trump, had a chilling reaction.
Fallon has no talent. Kimmel has no talent. They're next. They're going to be going. I hear they're going to be going. I don't know, but I would imagine because they get, Colbert has better ratings than Kimmel or Fallon. You know that.
They're next. I hear they're going to be going. Well, tonight, an ABC spokesperson confirms that Jimmy Kimmel's late-night show has been preempted indefinitely. Now, it comes just hours after a large set of ABC affiliates announced they would refuse to air Kimmel's show. They say because of comments the late-night host made on Monday night relating to the motives of the man that shot and killed Charlie Kirk, wrongly suggesting the killer was part of the MAGA movement. He was not. Nexstar, the largest owner of local stations in the country, came out and said it, quote, strongly objects to recent comments made by Kimmel concerning the killing of Charlie Kirk and will replace the show with other programming in its ABC-affiliated markets. And if that were the whole story, he said something, it was not correct, the affiliates pushed back, well, then that would be one story. But that, of course, is not the whole story, okay? Because crucially, just hours before that statement, Trump's hand-picked FCC chairman went on a podcast and suggested ABC's broadcast license or affiliates could be at risk if they did not suspend or fire Kimmel, essentially issuing an order saying, and I quote him here, "We can do this the easy way or the hard way." Well, hours later, ABC made the announcement Kimmel would indeed be taken off the air indefinitely. And this is just the latest chapter in Donald Trump's ongoing campaign to crack down on free speech, dominate the media, and essentially render the First Amendment meaningless. An extreme campaign that has been on overdrive the past week. I mean, just yesterday, you had the Deputy Attorney General of these United States, the number 2 of the Department of Justice and the former criminal lawyer for the president, suggesting using criminal anti-racketeering laws, the kind of things used for mobsters, RICO statutes, to go after and prosecute protesters who heckled Donald Trump at a restaurant, who yelled at him? We're also getting new reports today. The White House plans to target a variety of left-leaning groups and nonprofits in the coming weeks, all part of a larger and more dangerous effort underway. And it follows a playbook we have seen successfully run in recent years by authoritarian strongmen in places like Hungary and Turkey and Russia. Because in those places, they didn't just criminalize speech they didn't like, though some of them did some of that. Crucially, they made it virtually impossible to see and hear examples of that speech by taking de facto control of the media landscape. In Hungary, for example, the country's oldest newspaper was suddenly shuttered after being bought by a businessman with links to far-right President Viktor Orban. According to Reporters Without Borders, Orban has used media buyouts by government-connected oligarchs to build a true media empire subject to his party's orders. The group estimates such buyouts have given Orban's party control of some 80% of Hungary's media market resources. It is a similar situation in Turkey, where, according to Reuters, the biggest media brands are controlled by companies and people close to longtime leader Recep Erdogan and his AK party, following a series of acquisitions starting in 2008. Then, of course, there's Russia, where oligarchs friendly to President Vladimir Putin control much of the media. Wartime restrictions have shut down the rest. In each of these three countries, they didn't just arrest protesters or dissident journalists or show up knocking on the door of magazines. They used government power, and sometimes through legal mechanisms, to essentially roll up all of the country's media into a friendly propaganda arm of the regime. So given that context, I want you to look around the U.S. right now and see what's been happening here, right in front of our eyes. In July, the Trump FCC, that's the entity that Brendan Carr controls, approved the sale of Paramount, with it, CBS, to Skydance Media, which is controlled by the family of pro-Trump tech billionaire named Larry Ellison. It was his son, actually, who's buying it. Now, that approval only came after Paramount paid Trump $16 million to settle the president's obvious, frivolous, ludicrous lawsuit against CBS News and 60 Minutes for editing interviews. And after the Ellisons agreed to eliminate DEI programs, and after they agreed to install an executive, formerly from a conservative think tank, to essentially act as a sort of ideological minder at CBS News for political bias. So they did all those things, then they got the approval for this very, very large merger. After that, CBS canceled Stephen Colbert's top-rated late-night show, which was notorious for its criticism of the sitting president. Last week, after Larry Ellison officially leapfrogged another pro-Trump billionaire, Elon Musk, to become the world's richest man, the new Paramount conglomerate made another media bid, this time for Warner Brothers Discovery, which just so happens to own CNN. So there's a possibility that they could purchase that and roll that up as well. Then yesterday, we got this news about TikTok. Perhaps you've seen it. Do you remember the Chinese-owned app that was banned as a security risk because of a bipartisan vote in both houses of Congress and signed into law by Joe Biden? And then Donald Trump just literally ignored the law while he searched for a U.S. buyer. Well, yesterday, there was news of a framework of a deal. Interesting. Let's see what the deal is. Gives Americans an 80% stake in TikTok. Which Americans? Well, you'll never guess. Yes, Larry Ellison is one of them, along with far-right venture capitalist, Trump donor, Doge consultant, MAGA backer Mark Andreessen. As Talking Points memo noted, if all those deals all go through, that would mean the Murdoch family controlling Fox News, the Journal, New York Post, its other properties, Twitter, TikTok, CBS, CNN, and more owned by Elon Musk, and the Ellison family, the Washington Post owned by Jeff Bezos. The Trump administration is threatening to bring the government down on free speech and use it against dissent. It is also facilitating the sale of some of our biggest private media outlets to Trump allies and is a very obvious attempt to consolidate power over free expression. Ben Rhodes served as Deputy National Security Advisor to President Barack Obama, author of After the Fall, The Rise of Authoritarianism in the World We've Made. David Enrich is a New York Times Deputy Investigations Editor and reporter, author of the much celebrated, well-reviewed Murder the Truth, Fear the First Amendment, and a Secret Campaign to Protect the Powerful. They both join me now. It's good to have you here. Ben, let me just start with you. I said this when Colbert was fired, that it's not too much of an overstatement to say, like, the test of a free society is whether you live in a place where late-night comedians can be on TV making fun of the leader. And I still feel that way, and today feels pretty bad on that score.
No, it feels terrible. And your lead-in was really good, Chris. And frankly, my book that you just put up there goes into a lot of detail about these takeovers of the media. And here's what I'd stress about it. Some people see this and they think, well, it's just one TV show. It's just Stephen Colbert. It's just Jimmy Kimmel. It's just late night. What you have to see it as a part of a concerted strategy where not only do you have pro-Trump oligarchs consolidating control of the media, and frankly, that's what they are. I mean, if we were talking about Russia, if we were talking about Hungary, if we were talking about Turkey, you're talking about government-associated oligarchs, wealthy people with interest before the government, buying up the media because that's one way to retain favor with the leader. But also, really importantly, it's the example that is set. It's not just about what Jimmy Kimmel or Stephen Colbert said. It's the fact that they basically got axed for their speech. That is a message to every other broadcaster on every other medium in this country that if you say something the leader doesn't like, you're probably at risk of getting axed. They want, Chris, people like you and me to be sitting here right now and have another voice in our head every time we open our mouths, that if we say the wrong thing, that might be it for us too, right? This is not just cancel culture. It's way beyond that. It's trying to enforce essentially an ideological test on the broad-based news media that reaches the vast majority of Americans so that the only content they're seeing is essentially ideologically aligned with whatever Trump and his FCC director and a small group of people around him think. That's what's happening. And we're pretty advanced. The only other thing I'd say, Chris, is we're pretty far along on this thing, right? Like it took Putin a while to do this. It took Orban a while to do this. I think maybe because we have to think of this as we're in year 9 of the Trump era. Like he had one term to see what the landscape was like. He had 4 years out of power to consider what he'd do if he'd get back. They studied what Orban did. They studied what Erdogan did, what Putin did. There's one playbook that has been pursued everywhere. And I think what Americans need to realize is we're not at the beginning of the playbook, Chris. We're near the end of the playbook.
This is a story about government censorship. Right now, it's about Donald Trump's right-wing MAGA government censorship. If he gets away with it, it could break truly very long precedents and be used or abused by others. But right now, it's MAGA censorship, first and foremost. It's now immediately become a scandal for Trump's communications official, Brendan Carr. He's facing calls to investigate what he did here and some calls on the left for his resignation. Others are speaking out against the First Amendment abuses. We have more on that. There's also the question of how these companies responded to an extraordinary exertion of political pressure from powerful Trump officials. As the New York Times put it, Trump aides seizing on what many identify today as a pretext, meaning this isn't the real reason, even if other people are justifiably concerned about these statements, but a pretext of Kimmel's reference to MAGA leaders' initial response to what was that terrible Kirk shooting. And the Federal Communications Commission has been pulled into this in a way we haven't seen before because, again, if you're just tuning in or if aliens were landing on Earth and wondering how we do things in this country, the FCC, as you already know, is not in the comedy review business, nor is it supposed to be in the political and democratic censorship business. So let me get this out of the way. The FCC's actual job is a regulator dealing with communications, promoting competition. That means protecting against, for example, monopolies or one person or company owning too much media in one place. And they deal with regulations for new technologies to flourish alongside diversity and localism. That's diversity of the press, something the Trump administration opposes. They want only their views. And then localism doesn't have to be left or right, just the idea that we care about people getting local coverage in the country. But now under Trump, they have a Project 2025 vet, FCC Chairman Carr, who has a totally different approach. And he is seizing these powers and seeing from the courts and the companies whether he gets away with it. So he went on this MAGA podcast, publicizing a quite literal series of demands. And he pushed Trump's longstanding grudge against Kimmel, calling him kind of a sick project or the work that he does being sick, and then outlining a very specific public plan that ABC should suspend Kimmel, many wondering whether this will probably be a cancellation. It has been covered that way, but initially the demand was suspend Kimmel, or the FCC would make it hard on the company.
You know, when you look at the conduct that has taken place by Jimmy Kimmel, it appears to be some of the sickest conduct possible, a very reasonable, minimal step that can be taken. I mean, obviously, look, there's calls for Kimmel to be fired. I think, you could certainly see a path forward for suspension over this. And again, the FCC is going to have remedies that we could look at.
We have remedies. Be careful. Now, Carr's appearance, that was yesterday daytime. As you know, if you're watching this, by night, they had made the announcement. It set off rushed emergency meetings. Kimmel was going to address this issue and those remarks, and there was apparently a script because he normally has a show. Then at the local level, or that next level down, Nexstar, which is a huge ABC affiliate, they distribute more ABC than any other affiliate, announced it was basically going to preempt Kimmel indefinitely. And top leadership at Disney and ABC felt that bottom-up pressure from them, plus whatever backroom dealings we don't know about, plus Carr going public. And then we got to here. And I just want to slow down for a minute and make sure we understand what we're witnessing. Because when the news first broke last night, it looked bad. In a First Amendment sense, it looked suspicious. But very quickly, you have all of this other evidence. And that spells out a government censorship campaign. And there are people, and maybe there's more people than usual, who say, if it's for their team or their side, anything goes. But that is, of course, the definition of being lawless. And we aspire to more than being lawless in this country. When it comes to free speech, it's the First Amendment for a reason. So what this looks like is an unconstitutional effort from the government to censor and punish speech. And the wider history is that Donald Trump doesn't hide the ball on these things. It's not a secret. He's not mysterious. If this were a case, as I've mentioned in our coverage, it would hurt the administration, it would hurt the Trump administration as the defendant in a free speech case if they've admitted to all this, because then it looks like the government has a grudge, is unconstitutionally political, and then comes up with or brainstorms other later reasons as the pretext. That would be the tough evidence against them. And then you have the fact that everybody knows this. Jimmy Kimmel had emerged, in fact, more so than some Democrats or writers, because of his reach in media and comedy and culture, as a very consistent and, some would say, effective critic of Donald Trump. And Trump's responding to Kimmel now, not by saying, okay, thanks, glad we got that done. Quite the opposite. Continuing a drumbeat that we've been covering, where when a law firm or a university or a media company gives in to him, he immediately demands more. You have to ask yourself what these executives, including Disney's chief Bob Iger, who we'll get to in a moment, what they think their strategy is. Because immediately after the Kimmel suspension, Trump is publicly demanding other companies oust other hosts, including, full disclosure, our sister channel, NBC, on the entertainment side. Now, we work with NBC News. We don't do much directly with NBC Entertainment, but he is naming two hosts over there that he wants fired from their late-night appearances. Meanwhile, his enforcer appeared on Fox News and basically admitted the improper motive.
They're now facing the consequences of the choices that they made to appeal to a very, very narrow audience. Again, you can do that. You can start a podcast. You can go on YouTube. But if you're going to have a license from the FCC, we expect you to broadly serve the public interest. And I'm very glad to see that America's broadcasters are standing up to serve the interests of their community. We don't just have this progressive foie gras coming out from New York and Hollywood.
Number one, he's admitting they don't like that it's progressive. That's not what the government's supposed to do. You could substitute the word conservative, MAGA, or any other persuasion. The government is not supposed to, through the FCC or frankly any other part of the government, punish what he calls progressive foie gras. Okay, that's one. Two, legal fact check. The public interest standard is not something that he can just make up and lie about. There is a standard in the FCC rules and under the governing provision by Congress, if you want to get into it, Title 47, about what the public interest means. And it doesn't mean a sitting politician who doesn't like someone because they criticize him just throwing around the word public interest. As for the attack on television, well, we can all discuss how the media has been changing, but Jimmy Kimmel gets over 1.7 million TV viewers, roughly, and has broken out as one of the more popular late night hosts online. So on YouTube, which is the top streamer, it gets more than Netflix, he's got a whopping 20 million subscribers. So he has a TV audience and a large streaming audience, and no one really takes it that seriously that Trump thinks that it's bad that he's criticized by Kimmel, but also that they believe Kimmel is irrelevant or the FCC wants to help ABC run its business better. The broader effort is Trump trying to distort what people see and hear in the free press. Companies settling sometimes thin or legally frivolous lawsuits rather than go at the administration. But as I just showed you, those efforts are met with more retribution. It was ABC that settled the Stephanopoulos lawsuit, but now they have the Kimmel thing. NBC, again, our sister company, now facing Trump calling to get rid of their late night host. But that's not his only demand. All of this can even chill how the government is covered by outlets that keep their position when you see this much pressure. Now, Trump's attorney general is facing backlash from the right for her First Amendment attack this week, while the FCC chief admits an anti-First Amendment agenda, a big government approach where they want the government, through Trump and his officials, to help run these companies in the way that they think serves them, not you, the public, not free and fair democracy, but just serves their partisan agenda. And they're saying, change your conduct, or these companies can have to do it the hard way.
Frankly, when you see stuff like this, I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or, there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead.
Many experts calling that a shakedown. The companies face what could be the misuse of FCC power and its censorship demands when it comes time to approve or reject what could be multi-billion-dollar deals, some of which are alive right now. The FCC is supposed to look out for the public in those deals, monitoring whether, as I mentioned, there's local coverage or a monopoly. But the $6 billion deal that hangs in the balance is being linked quite clearly and in part of the pressure campaign of the FCC making these other demands. This week, the FCC chair provided what sounded like a roadmap if you want to do business with them. I mean, those are his words. After Kimmel's suspension went public, another ABC affiliate went further, saying Kimmel should be donating his own money to Charlie Kirk's conservative group, Turning Point USA. Now, that's an odd request. Kimmel may have his political views, but having members of the media pressured by the Trump administration to tell other members of the media, an independent comedian, artist, or even journalist, to go donate and fund the political group, this is really out there. Trump is also weighing in, saying networks who criticize him could face more government retribution over their licenses. Again, improper motive. This would be evidence against him in court. Quote, they give me only bad publicity. They're getting a license. I would think maybe their license should be taken away. That is not how the license system works. If any network decides to fight and litigate this rather than give in, these are pieces of evidence against the government. And 2 years ago, the Supreme Court upheld these protected speech rights in what was then a unanimous decision that government officials cannot attempt to coerce private parties in order to punish or suppress views the government disfavors. Let me read that again, because this is from a case involving the NRA and a bunch of issues, and all the Trump appointees on the court. This is a preview, and if Disney or Bob Iger or anyone's watching, I'm sure your own lawyers could tell you this too. You have a very recent ruling with Trump justices saying they can't do what they're doing this week. Government officials cannot coerce private parties to punish or suppress views that the government disfavors. That would include, presumably, the foie gras progressivism that Brendan Carr admitted he is suppressing.
The fallout from ABC's decision to pull Jimmy Kimmel Live off the air indefinitely continues this morning with a wave of reaction from Hollywood to Washington. Protesters packed the streets outside of Disney and ABC headquarters in both New York and Los Angeles yesterday, carrying signs with slogans like "Defend Free Speech." Many comedians and celebrities also rallied around Jimmy Kimmel and against what they view as a threat to the First Amendment. Podcaster Mark Maron said, "This is what authoritarianism looked like." Actor and director Ben Stiller posted, quote, "This isn't right." And former late-night host David Letterman had this to say.
I feel bad about this because we all see where this is going, correct? It's managed media, and it's no good. It's silly. It's ridiculous, and you can't go around firing somebody because you're fearful or trying to suck up to an authoritarian criminal administration in the Oval Office. That's just not how this works.
Democratic leaders are also speaking out. Former President Barack Obama posted on social media, quote, "After years of complaining about cancel culture, the current administration has taken it to a new and dangerous level by routinely threatening regulatory action against media companies unless they muzzle or fire reporters and commentators it doesn't like." Top House Democrats, meanwhile, are calling for FCC Chairman Brendan Carr to resign, arguing he has, quote, "engaged in the corrupt abuse of power." And the top Democrat on the House Oversight Committee says he will launch an investigation into the Trump administration, ABC, and Sinclair amid, quote, "ongoing efforts to censor opposition to the president." And as Joe mentioned, the Wall Street Journal editorial board is reacting to Kimmel's suspension in a new piece entitled "The FCC, Disney, and Jimmy Kimmel." It reads in part, quote, "Regulatory power in the hands of a willful president can too easily become a weapon against political opponents, including the media." The squeeze on Disney looks to be a case of cancel culture on the right. For a decade or more, the voters who backed Mr. Trump watched and listened as coastal elites of media and entertainment showed their contempt for middle American values. Those coastal grandees shouldn't be surprised now if the public isn't as outraged as they are by the Carr FCC's abuse of its power against opponents. We want to be clear that none of this justifies the right's resort to regulatory censorship. As victims of cancel culture for so long, conservatives, more than anyone, should oppose it. The political cycle of using government to punish opponents is taking the country into dark corners that will result in less freedom and less free speech for all sides. The best immediate remedy is getting the FCC out of the business of regulating media. Meanwhile, President Trump and FCC Chairman Brendan Carr are celebrating ABC's decision and are signaling the crackdown may not stop there.
Are you going to ask Brendan Carr to weigh in on other late-night hosts that you have?
Well, you know, when a late-night host is on network television, there is a licensing. I'll give you an example. I read someplace that the networks were 97% against me. I get 97% negative, and yet I won easily. I won all 7 swing states, popular, won everything. And if they're 97% against, they give me only bad publicity or press. I mean, they're getting a license. I would think maybe their license should be taken away. It would be up to Brendan Carr. He had no talent. He's a whack job, but he had no talent. And more importantly than talent, he had no, because a lot of people have no talent to get ratings. But he had no ratings. His ratings were worse than Colbert, I think. They got rid of Colbert, which was a good thing to do. And look, that's something that should be talked about for licensing, too. When you have a network and you have evening shows and all they do is hit Trump, that's all they do. If you go back, I guess they haven't had a conservative on in years or something, somebody said. But when you go back and you take a look, all they do is hit Trump. They're licensed. They're not allowed to do that. They're an arm of the Democrat Party.
Asked earlier about Fallon and Seth Meyers, but is the president's view that they should also be taken off the air shared by the FCC?
I don't speak for the president, so obviously, he speaks for himself on that. Our goal and our obligation here is to make sure that broadcasters are serving the public interest. And if there's local TV stations that don't think that running that programming does it, then they have every right under the law in their contracts to preempt it. And we'll see how this plays out. But I do think that, again, we are in the midst of a massive shift in dynamics in the media ecosystem for lots of reasons. Again, including the permission structure that President Trump's election has provided. And I would simply say we're not done yet with seeing the consequences of that shift.
Well, what does that mean when you say you're not done yet, then? I mean, will you only be pleased when none of these comedians have a show on broadcast television?
No, again, it's not about any particular show or any particular person. It's just we're in the midst of a very disruptive moment right now, and I just frankly expect that we're going to continue to see changes in the media ecosystem.
Mika, we had talked about how obviously the Wall Street Journal editorial page had come out against this. I've got to say also, somebody who usually is in support of most of Donald Trump's policies on the Wall Street Journal editorial page, Kimberly Strassel, writes a very tough op-ed. And its headline, Back to Censor Culture, and talks about how it wasn't too long ago, she said, the right was criticizing the left for canceling people. Now, the right is doing the same thing. We've talked about it before, but think about the madness of all of this. Again, you've got now the MAGA right being champions of cancel culture. You've got the MAGA right now trying to crush free speech after being supposed free speech absolutists. You have Pam Bondi talking about going after Home Depot if they won't print out flyers, certain political flyers, maybe arrest them, talking about firing. And again, the idea that squads of people are going around and saying, don't worry, Charlie, we're going to find people who used free speech in a way you wouldn't have liked and get them fired from their jobs.
Right.
Are you kidding me?
Right.
Are you kidding me? This is the very thing that he and the MAGA movement and the free press that were complaining about for a decade. And now they're taking it in a more extreme way than the left ever did. I mean, again, they've canceled 2 of 3 late-night show hosts in a short period of time, and now they're threatening retribution for people who won't print out flyers. They're threatening retribution for people that put out a mean tweet. I mean, we've made it very clear. We've made it very clear before that political violence is heinous. That against Charlie Kirk was absolutely just vile and heinous. And that's why we saw most sides strongly and roundly condemning that violence.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're actually doing the opposite of what Charlie Kirk talked about in his campus tours says all you need to know about these people.
Well, they're sort of stepping on themselves. On the right, I was watching some podcasts on this, and they were obviously very right-leaning, and they, it would have made more sense in terms of what you think they said their values are, to say, I really didn't like what Jimmy Kimmel said, but he should not have been taken off the air because we believe in free speech. But you can also express doubt or disgust in what was said, but to then agree that he should have been pulled off the air totally turns everything they've ever been talking about
Canceled.
over. Yeah.
Canceled.
It doesn't,
and again,
it doesn't make sense.
They want to cancel late night hosts.
Okay.
And it's really unbelievable. I want to bring in David Drucker here. David, this is wild. Like, you've been following this for the past decade, and there's these free speech absolutists. Elon Musk, I'm going to take over Twitter and be a free speech absolutist. The free press, the free speech absolutists. All of these people on the MAGA right, free speech absolutists and against cancel culture. And it is playing out now in a way that you have an attorney general threatening to arrest people that don't print flyers. You have 2 out of 3 late night hosts canceled, completely canceled. And now they're going around and saying they're going to find people in their workplaces and get them fired if they put out an inappropriate tweet.
Yeah, we're clearly, Joe, living through an illiberal moment. I mean, you know, to your last point there, we have the Vice President of the United States asking Americans to rat out their neighbors. If you hear anybody saying something wrong or something that is vile or that is rude, rat them out. Make sure they get fired. Let's get rid of them. And I think the issue here is not so, well, there are several issues here. I think we need to be clear that if a private company or private institution doesn't want to platform somebody, doesn't want to put them on the air, doesn't want to give them a microphone, they don't have to. The First Amendment protects us from the government monitoring and regulating speech. But the problem is that's exactly what's happening here. When you look at what ABC did with Jimmy Kimmel, the issue isn't that maybe ABC, you know, looked at the finances, looked at the changing tastes of viewers when it comes to late night television and decided, given all the money they're paying him, they were going to move in a different direction. The problem is that this appears to be a very clear case of government coercion. And when you look at how Brendan Carr and President Trump are talking about this issue, Trump is actually more honest about it. I don't want these people on the air. I think the government has a right to get rid of them. I'm going to do it. And then Carr is weaselly about it in that he's like, hey, listen, it's not, you know, it's not the FCC. You know, maybe companies just will decide this on their own with the clear message being, this is what we would like you to decide without us wielding the hammer, and we'll reward you if you do it. I think that ultimately what is very ironic here is that President Trump campaigned specifically on, from his perspective, restoring free speech. And conservatives and people that flocked to his coalition were that was a very attractive message, because for people on the right, they feel as though they have not been allowed to say things they believe about controversial issues without fear of reprisal at work, in universities, even in government. And here somebody was saying, I'm going to put an end to that, and I'm going to even the playing field in terms of everybody's going to be able to speak their mind, not just people on the left. And here the administration is going in a completely different direction that's antithetical to American values, but also just runs headlong into the First Amendment.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Donald Trump's administration has been attacking free expression since he got back into office, threatening critics with prosecution, targeting colleges and law firms, deporting protesters or student op-ed writers, or putting them into detention, who are here on legal visas for the views they expressed, and then arresting people who protest the deportations. None of it's been particularly popular. The White House's latest overreach appears to have ignited an angry national backlash, openly using the threat of government power to pressure one of the country's biggest, most storied corporations, Disney, to indefinitely suspend ABC late night host Jimmy Kimmel for offending MAGA sensibilities. It's Trump's most high visibility authoritarian attack on free speech. And yet, that's really saying something. Hundreds of demonstrators, many of them writers and actors, gathered outside Kimmel's Hollywood studio today, as well as Disney's Burbank offices and ABC's Manhattan headquarters, to protest his suspension. Meanwhile, Google searches for cancel Disney Plus spiked across the country as droves of social media users posted they were ending their subscriptions to the media giant's app. And in a rare public comment, Michael Eisner, the former longtime CEO of Disney, took to social media to blast the company and its capitulation to the government. Quote, "Where has all the leadership gone?" The suspending indefinitely of Jimmy Kimmel immediately after the chairman of the FCC's aggressive yet hollow threatening of the Disney company is yet another example of out-of-control intimidation. Even some Republicans recognize this censorship campaign for what it was and are openly expressing worry about the precedent it sets. On his podcast today, Senator Ted Cruz, that Ted Cruz, likened Trump's FCC chairman Brendan Carr to a mobster.
And so he threatens explicitly, we're going to cancel ABC's license. We're going to take them off the air so ABC cannot broadcast anymore. And I got to say, he threatens it. He says, we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way.
Yeah.
And I got to say, that's right out of Goodfellas. That's right out of a mafioso coming into a bar going, nice bar you have here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it.
The questionable and wildly oscillating accent aside, Cruz was not exaggerating. Today, when Trump was asked about Ted Cruz comparing the FCC chairman to a mobster, the president defended his man and managed to sound like a mob boss.
These airways, they make millions and millions of dollars. The news makes millions of dollars. ABC, your network. I mean, your network wrote very badly about me, and they had to pay me $16 million.
So do you think you have a right, or that Brendan Carr has a right to take away the licenses? No, I think Brendan Carr is a patriot. I think Brendan Carr is a courageous person. I think Brendan Carr doesn't like to see the airwaves be used illegally and incorrectly and purposely horribly. Doesn't like to see a person that won the election in a landslide get 97% bad publicity before the election.
It was a pretty narrow victory, actually, electorally speaking. Meanwhile, Jimmy Kimmel hasn't been fired. The show hasn't been canceled yet, but it seems increasingly likely ABC's suspension won't be reversed. Two insiders told Rolling Stone that the lead up to Kimmel's suspension, multiple executives, ABC, Disney, and their affiliates, quote, felt Kimmel had not actually said anything over the line, but the threat of Trump administration retaliation loomed. And that threat of government retaliation in the form of Trump's Federal Communications Commission is precisely what puts this censorship campaign in just a completely different category from any past instance where local stations refuse to air network content.
Has there ever been anyone you felt you clicked with? And what was his name? Susan.
That was a special 1997 episode of the ABC sitcom Ellen, in which the character played by real-life lesbian Ellen DeGeneres finally came out. It was boycotted by family values groups who succeeded in getting at least one network affiliate in Alabama to refuse to air the episode. That was about it. Then in 2003 came the Dixie Chicks, that's the hit country band whose lead singer, Natalie Maines, told a London crowd this as the Iraq War loomed. I lived through that, and the public backlash was swift and enormous. I mean, scores of radio stations banned their DJs from playing the Dixie Chicks for years. Some even suspended DJs who broke the ban. The Dixie Chicks had to basically break up for more than a decade. But in neither that case nor in Ellen was there overt government pressure for censorship from an FCC chair making mobster-like threats. The only thing that might come close was back in July when CBS announced it was canceling Stephen Colbert's late night show at the end of the season. And the president of the United States celebrated, posting to social media, quote, I hear Jimmy Kimmel is next. Last night, Colbert noted the similarities between his case and Kimmel's.
So a company apparently capitulating to the whims of the president in order to ensure their merger goes through? Has that ever happened before? And what's that? What? I can't. What? Oh, I'm being told not to answer that question.
All this is happening because Trump is weaponizing the Federal Communications Commission in ways that never really been done before. The FCC has been around for nearly a century. It was created as part of the New Deal to ensure fairness in broadcasting and to regulate the then nascent growing broadcast networks, both radio and then TV. And it was designed as a nonpartisan agency that's independent from the executive branch. It's not part of the White House. It's not part of the cabinet. That independence has always been the responsibility of the FCC's 5 leading commissioners, and they're picked by presidents confirmed by the Senate for 5-year terms. Thanks to resignations under Donald Trump, there are now only 3 commissioners at FCC. There's Brendan Carr, Trump's chairman. There's Trump's latest appointee, a former Republican Senate staffer, and there is one Democrat on the FCC. Her name is Ana Gomez. She worked in a variety of roles at the FCC before she was appointed as a commissioner by Joe Biden in 2023. She joins me now. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Before I get into this, just what's it like to work there right now?
It's really alarming. I am very alarmed by this administration's campaign of censorship and control. It is damaging to our democracy. It is censoring what the broadcasters can or cannot say about this administration or whatever ideology this administration wants to espouse. And that's not good for our democracy.
Do you think that Brendan Carr's statements were defensible or appropriate uses of his power as commissioner?
I think it's very important to say that the FCC does not have the authority, the constitutional right, or the ability to take action against broadcasters because the FCC does not like their editorial decisions or a comedian's jokes, whether you like them or not. That is not what the FCC can do. In fact, the First Amendment prohibits us from censoring broadcasters, and the Communications Act specifically prohibits the FCC from censoring broadcasters.
I noticed, though, you didn't answer the question. Do you think that Commissioner Carr's statements were appropriate?
I don't think that we should be threatening broadcasters. It is a chilling of speech that is prohibited by our First Amendment. And the FCC is a powerful regulator of our broadcasters. As you noted, the broadcasters have transactions before the FCC. They need to get the FCC's authorization if they want to merge with another broadcaster or if they have a license renewal. Or right now, the FCC is considering lifting ownership caps to let them consolidate even more. They have business before the FCC. They want to make the FCC happy. So they are going to censor in advance, and that is not appropriate.
There's sometimes questions when we're seeing things that this administration is doing between things that are norm breaking or inappropriate or stretching the bounds, and then there are things that seem flatly illegal or unconstitutional. Do you think the essentially whether explicit or implicit trading of policing speech in favor of some sort of regulatory favors, do you think that is legal? Like, do you think that's something that is legal or constitutional to do?
No, I think it's unlawful. It's both a violation of the Constitution and the Communications Act. And it's not in our authority under the Communications Act. We have the authority to regulate broadcasters in the public interest. This administration is taking the public interest and making it about anything it doesn't like. Well, that is inappropriate. It is very difficult to take action against broadcasters for the content that they broadcast on purpose, because we need to be careful about not crossing that line of violating the First Amendment.
I've covered multiple, FCCs through the years, and FCCs in Republican administrations, including Michael Powell during the Bush administration and Ajit Pai in the first Trump administration. And my sense has always been this is an independent agency, but its priorities and its policy changes when there's a new administration because that new administration appoints the commissioner. But even if that's the case, there is still some sense of independence that they aren't simply an arm of the White House and of the president. Do you agree with that? And do you think something has changed now?
Yes, the FCC was created as an independent agency, as you mentioned in your opener. Congress created the Federal Radio Commission, which was the precursor to the FCC, and it thought about whether it should place it in the Department of Commerce. But it decided that it was too dangerous to have such an important broadcast medium being regulated by one person subject to the whims of one political party. And therefore, it created an independent commission, multi-member commission. Again, it's not one person that can regulate according to that person's whims. And then when it created the Federal Communications Commission, it did the same thing. And over the years, the FCC has asserted its independence from pressure from the White House. Very famously, Newton Minow told the president he wasn't going to pull a broadcast license because it was too important to maintain that independence. And he told the president at the time, I did you a favor here.
Was that LBJ? Was that?
I can't remember which president it was. There was another case where the chairman did the same thing. He was pressured by the president, can't remember which president it was, and he did the same thing. We have had to assert our independence for decades from exactly this type of political pressure because it's so dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, there's a sort of analog here, whether in the actual structure to the Independent Federal Reserve, which of course has the Federal Reserve Act, which sets up independent structure, to the way the Department of Justice has operated in the post-Watergate era, both as a matter of norms and sort of some statutory changes, which is, yes, it's part of the administration, but not just the plaything of the president for important reasons. I want to play you what the president did say. He seems to have a theory here of a kind of new fairness doctrine that has been violated by the networks that he has it out for. Take a listen to what he had to say.
We're talking about, I assume you're talking mostly about the networks, but they have a licensing procedure, and you can read it as well. They have to show honesty and integrity. And when they take a good, well, I think the people decide. That's why I'm president. When they take a great success, like you often do, and you make it into like it's a loser, or you put a negative spin on it, I don't think that's right.
Earlier, we played the clip of him saying, citing some statistics about, 97%. I have no idea where that comes from. He says, when you have comedians and all they do is hit Trump, I don't think that's legal. To the extent there's a theory here, it seems to be that if there's too much negative content on networks, that means they're in violation of the law and they can have their licenses revoked. Is that true?
No. License revocations are very rare. And we have rules about license revocation. And it's, like I said, it's very rarely done. The last one I can think of, we revoked a license because the broadcaster did not air for over a year. So
that seems like a pretty big failure.
We do have rules that regulate how broadcasters can operate in the public interest. But as I mentioned, the public interest isn't some amorphous concept that just allows the commission to decide, well, you have been critical of this administration and therefore you should lose your license. That would be contrary to the First Amendment.
Yes, and we have a Supreme Court ruling from last year in Verillo that was very explicit. 9-0 decided that the government can't use its sort of coercive speech powers on private entities to try to get them to regulate speech in just the fashion that it appears that the chair of the commission has done in the last day or so. Ana Gomez, who's currently a commissioner on the Federal Communications Commission. Thank you so much. That was really, really illuminating.
Thank you.
People are worried that we won't keep saying what we want to say or that we'll be censored. But I'm going to cover the president's trip to the UK just like I normally would. Here we go. Well, guys, President Trump just wrapped up his 3-day trip to the UK, and he
looked incredibly handsome.
As always, his tie was
exactly the right length.
And his face looked
like a color that exists in nature.
While back here at home, his administration is pursuing a crackdown on free speech. And completely unrelated, I just want to say before we get started here that I've always admired and respected Mr. Trump. I've always believed he was, a visionary, innovator, a great president, an even better golfer.
Is free speech more under attack in Britain or America?
How dare you, sir! How dare you, sir! What outfit are you with, sir? The Antifa Herald Tribune?
Some of Jimmy Kimmel's late-night colleagues reacting to ABC's decision to pull his show off the air indefinitely. Welcome to the fourth hour of Morning Joe. It's 6 a.m. on the West Coast, 9 a.m. in the East.
It is a packed hour ahead. We're following a number of stories, including Democrats unveiling their own funding bill to avert a government shutdown weeks ahead of the deadline. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries will join us in just a moment with those details. Plus, President Trump and China's Xi Jinping are currently speaking by phone at this moment about a deal to keep TikTok from being banned in the United States. And the fallout does continue from ABC's decision to pull Jimmy Kimmel Live off the air indefinitely.
NBC News national correspondent Liz Kreutz has more on the wave of reaction from Hollywood to Washington.
Jimmy, just let me say, I stand with you and your staff 100%.
Overnight, Jimmy Kimmel's fellow late-night hosts rallying behind him.
That is blatant censorship.
I don't know what's going on, and no one does, but I do know Jimmy Kimmel, and he's a decent, funny, and loving guy, and I hope he comes back.
ABC's decision to suspend Kimmel indefinitely coming after the comedian recently made comments on his show about Charlie Kirk's alleged assassin.
With the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
Kimmel's supporters protesting outside Disney, which owns ABC, saying the company caved to political pressure from the Trump administration, including FCC chairman Brendan Carr, who later went on CNBC to explain his position.
The issue that arose here, where lots and lots of people were upset, was not a joke. It was not, making fun or pillaring me or the administration or the president. It was appearing to directly mislead the American public about a significant fact.
Carr also warning that the broadcast TV crackdown isn't over.
I think it's worthwhile to have the FCC look into whether The View and some of these other programs that you have still qualify as bona fide news programs.
I don't think this is the last shoe to drop.
On Air Force One, President Trump suggested punishing broadcasters that air unfavorable coverage of him.
I would think maybe their license should be taken away.
On Wednesday, before Kimmel's suspension, Carr threatened to take action against ABC over his remarks. Soon after, two of the country's largest local television station owners, Nexstar and Sinclair, said they would no longer air the show. It's more than politics at stake for these major media companies. Nexstar needs the FCC's approval for a major merger. Just 2 months ago, CBS announced the cancellation of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, another Trump critic. At the time, CBS's parent company Paramount was also seeking a high-profile merger. Critics say Carr is aware of the financial dynamics.
Anything he can do to shake them down on behalf of Donald Trump, he's doing.
Now, Democrats promising an investigation and warning the FCC.
There's going to be a Democratic majority in just over a year. And to the FCC chairperson and anyone involved in these dirty deals, get a lawyer and save your records.
With us, we have former White House Director of Communications to President Obama, Jennifer Palmieri, and staff writer at The Atlantic, Tolu Olorunnipa. It's good to have you both. Tolu, just in terms of you're covering the White House and politics, you're hearing from Trump's words, but there might be more. What are you watching?
Well, this is an example of Trump saying the quiet part out loud. You heard Brendan Carr try to sort of talk about this in a very legal and nuanced way and talk about how this is not the federal government putting pressure on ABC or on any network. And then Trump comes out on Air Force One and says, I think they should have their license taken if they say anything bad about me. I've seen 97% of the commentary is negative. Well, obviously, that statistic is made up out of thin air, but he's saying the quiet part out loud. He is unrestricted in terms of his ability and willingness to go after his political enemies, including in the media. And he's seen a lot of progress in his own mind in going after his enemies in media, law, and universities and business, and now he's going after the broadcast networks, and he believes that he has the opportunity and the ability to make them cow to his will.
I mean, Jen, to that point, on Air Force One yesterday, he more or less said, if a broadcaster says something critical of me, we should be able to look at their licenses. I mean, he just said, and that's we've never been there before. And let's give us the 30,000-foot look here, because I think we have to take this in tandem with what we've heard from the vice president and other top aides in the wake of the Charlie Kirk assassination, how they claim without evidence that this is part of some left-wing conspiracy, and therefore they have to go after NGOs, go after liberal-leaning groups, with the president suggesting that Antifa is a terrorist organization that needs to be cracked down upon, and even a $15 billion lawsuit to the New York Times.
Yeah, they have. So it's September. And I think that in some ways, it's like you can see they have a plan. It's Project 2025. There is a plan in place, and on immigration, very aggressive in implementing it. And then, things like this, like the FCC, which we knew was going to be, I think most Americans have no idea, like, what that is or who's in charge of it. But they had spelled out what they wanted to do on sort of monitoring the media as well. And then the opportunity, but it's sort of dormant until the opportunity arises. And the opportunity arises, and then it's like, bam, they are, to see the chairman of the FCC on cable news explaining, sort of laying out we could do this, or this was a podcast, we could do this the easy way or the hard way.
Yeah.
and then going on to defend what happened. You know, this is and then signal that there might be more coming, and the President of the United States to back him up. You know, this is a plan. They were waiting for the moment. And the same thing, I think, with the NGOs. They want to go after NGOs on the progressive side, and then they see this moment. And this in the last week since the Kirk assassination, you see them just gunning for it.
The FCC chair really having a change, seemingly to have a change of heart about free speech.
Right.
ABC suspended Jimmy Kimmel after government pressure from the FCC, but the move now has ABC and its parent company Disney in crisis. So first, let me tell you tonight, we have new reporting and some special guests on the internal decision-making there, a company that has caved but may yet change gears again. Meanwhile, this Kimmel suspension has galvanized this national debate about Trump's effort to censor and silence critics and the press. And up top, I can tell you there is broad evidence of a broad plot here. Donald Trump's attacks, threats, and lawsuits against a whole range of outlets, speakers, and critics. And right now tonight, he ends this week with a fresh loss. There's that new unusual lawsuit he filed against the New York Times, basically like Kimmel, in effect, because he didn't appreciate or agree with their coverage of him, their criticism. Well, today, a federal judge tossed that entire claimed $15 billion suit, noting it's decidedly improper and impermissible in its claims against the newspaper's First Amendment protected reporting. Now, Trump has lost. The suit is tossed. He can still respond in court. He can try to refile something that would, unlike this case, clear the very low hurdle of what is just a permissible suit. The case is technically separate from ABC, but clearly is the same playbook. And the Times fighting and winning quickly hangs over all of this tonight because it's the same playbook. And top Republicans also are not defending everything Trump is doing as it's all cast in the open this week. A Republican senator warning the censorship effort should make everyone careful about any lines we cross in diminishing free speech. Democrats are united against it, speaking out, looking at ways they can deal with this, and they view it as a five-alarm fire and watershed fight. So that's just some of the initial reaction. There is also the law here, and we will continue to remind you of the law, exercising our free speech reporting and factual efforts within a whole national debate about what is factual and what is the law, because it's a likely violation of the First Amendment to pressure private companies to silence their views. The First Amendment prohibits the government from abridging free speech and free exercise of the press rights. And so that's from the beginning. Of all the things that have changed, that is supposed to held steady. And the Supreme Court has held that for a very long time. Just last year, it reaffirmed a core holding that government officials cannot coerce private parties in order to punish or suppress views the government disfavors, which is literally the censorship agenda that Trump and his FCC chief Carr have been pursuing. So the thing they're doing is currently illegal, unlawful, unconstitutional. Now, there's no split here on this issue in the court, which also makes this a stronger precedent, different from, for example, cases you followed where it's 5-4 and then maybe the court changes and a couple of years later it's 4-5, right? It changes. Well, let me show you. All 9 justices are for that ruling. You know, when we show you breaking coverage and we have the justices against and dissent, you'll notice that's blank. That's accurate because all 9 said the government cannot coerce businesses or media outlets, etc. You can't coerce them to suppress or change views. That's obviously against free speech in the First Amendment. The same case held the First Amendment prohibits the government from relying on the threat of invoking legal sanctions and other means of coercion. For example, let's say you threaten it, but you haven't done it yet. That also is illegal if it's to achieve suppressing disfavored speech. So if Trump and Carr disfavor Jimmy Kimmel's criticism and make threats for it, that's unconstitutional. Again, who agrees with that? All 9 current justices, including, as you know, many appointed by Trump. So this is a big point here as we wrap up the week. As Trump loses in court over a different case against a different media outlet, These are the justices who would, of course, ultimately rule on any challenge to the FCC allegedly shaking down networks like ABC and Disney. But there's a big if. That would be if Disney and ABC fought this in court. If they stood up to the pressure, like the New York Times is doing, like many citizens are doing. They have lawyers on retainer. They have billions of dollars. But so far, even though this is the court that awaits them, 9-0 against exactly the type of censorship that Trump and Carr are doing, but so far they've been giving in, rushing to surrender. Here's how the nonpartisan AP puts it, what's going on right now in your country. Trump's moves against media outlets mirror authoritarian approaches to silencing dissent. It's happening here now. There is pushback. There is even a court standing by that might very well side against that authoritarian effort, but this is happening now. Now, there's an acclaimed expert on authoritarianism, Timothy Snyder. He's warned that with Trump, this is exactly what you have to face, and cautioned against obeying in advance, even as some powerful people and companies appear to be doing that. Then others are speaking out. And it is easy sometimes for people to kind of look away and say, well, I don't know if this concerns me, or isn't that just entertainment, or isn't that just one channel? But free speech is tested in the breach. Whether it is a journalist or a dissident, a politician or a comedian, a musician, or someone doing interpretive dance that some autocrat doesn't like. And remember, we don't always get to pick the person. It is interesting that Ted Cruz is speaking out against Jimmy Kimmel, even though Jimmy Kimmel has obviously made jokes about Ted Cruz and plenty of other politicians in both parties. But that shows some level of intellectual consistency on this issue. It doesn't really matter whether you like Jimmy Kimmel or whether you ever watched his program. And when you look around, a lot of other people who weigh in with free speech, whether you think it's funny or not, or you agree with their politics or not, across late night, we are seeing them stand up and speaking the way they do about this alleged cowardice of those already bowing to Trump's censorship.
Jimmy Kimmel was suspended by ABC after pressure from the FCC, leaving everyone thinking WTF.
We have another fun, hilarious, administration-compliant show
that I've always admired and respected Mr. Trump.
If you felt a little off these past couple of days, it's probably because our great father has not been home.
And if you've ever seen me say anything negative about him, that's just AI.
President Trump is
making America great again.
Is Donald Trump stifling free speech?
Of course not, John.
All they do is hit Trump. They're licensed. They're not allowed to do that.
Yes, they are. There's a reason free speech is in the very First Amendment. It stands above all others. You might even say it's
the ultimate.
That's some of what we heard there. And you'll notice the darker jokes are about what it would be like if we continue down this road, if Trump gets away with this. And remember whose voice you didn't hear in that montage. Jimmy Kimmel. Now, some Americans are already pushing back.
Disney Plus, yeah, y'all could go ahead and hit the road, Jack.
That was your mistake, getting scared by the FCC.
Not Disney Plus, not a Disney cruise, not Disneyland, not Disney World.
I found out that there's a protest at Disney headquarters and I'm going.
Disney Plus and Hulu canceled. Throw you in the bin.
We will not be there with Mickey and Minnie.
ABC and Disney executives now scrambling over their rush decision Wednesday to give in to the government, top brass, even engaging in talks to get Kimmel back on the air. That is a very different tone from Wednesday when they rushed to respond to the FCC threats and made a point of announcing that he was going to be benched basically for the long haul. They didn't say it was a week or 2 weeks. They just sort of said, well, indefinitely. This whole thing on the ABC Disney side goes all the way up to the Disney chief, Bob Iger. The buck stops with this man. He is a powerful man. He controls Disney and has done that for many years in and out of that role. And right now, his legacy is being written more for his business acumen, which is widely praised, his ability to manage talent. I could just tell you quite honestly, this is a person who people in news and media think of as very smart and powerful. But right now, a lot of people who know free speech and the First Amendment, a lot of people who work with Jimmy Kimmel, a lot of people from Ted Cruz out to liberal lawyers say he is overseeing the wrong decision and direction. Instead of doing what the New York Times did and standing up for his work and his people, he appears to be co-signing what for now is an effort to allow the government to silence critics. We have more reporting on Mr. Iger and that aspect of this coming up later this hour with some very special experts. As for the New York Times editorial board, which of course is separate than the newsroom and separate than the lawyers, but they're all on the same page about the First Amendment, they note today the ability to disagree with other people on raw, difficult issues without fear of repression is the essence of American freedom. That freedom is under attack. And this is the way we live now. We do live in a capitalist country. We know that people consume media through private companies. And we know that those companies do care about the bottom line and live in a regulated environment. But the Trump second term is serving up a level of autocratic challenge that we didn't always face in the first, where we have to decide as a country, as people, and those people involved in running certain companies have to decide where the line is. Can you uphold the First Amendment? And do you have what some would call courage, but others would call the basic prudence to look at a Supreme Court that's held 9-0 that the government can't do this to your company and play that out in court and find out if you can win or not? Or do you, as our expert cautioned against, do you obey in advance?
Here's that breaking news one more time. Disney has just announced that Jimmy Kimmel will return to television tomorrow, saying in a statement last Wednesday, we made the decision to suspend production on the show to avoid further inflaming a tense situation at an emotional moment for our country. It is a decision we made because we felt some of the comments were ill-timed and thus insensitive. We have spent the last days having thoughtful conversations with Jimmy. And after those conversations, we reached the decision to return the show on Tuesday. Joining us now, Puck senior correspondent Dylan Byers. Is this a surprise, Dylan?
It's not a surprise that he was going to come back. I think that was what Disney had been telegraphing from the beginning. I mean, in many ways, the only person who might have called an end to that, I think, was Jimmy Kimmel himself, if he recognized an opportunity here to walk. Look, there's a lot to unpack here. On the one hand, you know, Disney is still caught, I think, between a rock and a hard place when it comes to, you know, their intention to sort of do the right thing here, frankly, and also satisfy the creative community, satisfy Hollywood. But I don't necessarily foresee pressure from the Trump administration or the FCC going away. So how they navigate that, and I think it's going to be really interesting to watch what sort of agreement they came to with Kimmel in terms of what he's going to say on air when he comes back on the show tomorrow night. Because, of course, sort of the original catalyst here for Disney suspending his show, at least in their words, is that they sort of wanted to ratchet down, that, you know, take down the temperature, cool things off, because, as they say in that statement, it was a very emotionally sensitive moment in the country. Now, Jimmy had some things that he wanted to say. Disney clearly had some things they did not want him to say. Where did they net out here? And what is he going to say in that opening monologue that is going to simultaneously, you know, I think appease Disney while also making the sort of statement that a guy like Jimmy Kimmel wants to make about this issue?
So Brendan Carr, by the way, was at a forum earlier today in New York City. He defended the Jimmy Kimmel comments. He said Jimmy is in the situation that he's in because of his ratings, not because of anything that's happened at the federal government level. Obviously, that doesn't line up with the sequence of events. The New York Times did a great timeline on how this whole thing unfolded. Jimmy Kimmel made the statements on Monday night. Not much of a reaction to them. Neither was there much of a reaction Tuesday morning. It wasn't until a few accounts that, you know, have the job of clipping late night shows looking for what they see as liberal bias, clipping them, and then that stuff being amplified by a certain set of highly followed people like Elon Musk. That's when a car got involved, and that's when Sinclair made their decision. And after that is when ABC made its decision. So obviously the pressure is clear on the one side for Bob Iger from the government. What about the pressure on the other side? Who was he hearing from? How loud was it? How big was the demand for him to resolve the Kimmel issue with Kimmel coming back on air?
Well, look, obviously the blowback was intense. And I think if the intention was to dial down the energy, I think anyone who's lived in this country for the last few days know that that really didn't happen. And there was, a sort of statement signed on by many of the biggest stars in Hollywood. That statement, frankly, was sort of weak. They didn't necessarily threaten any action or said they were going to stop working with Disney. But look, if you're Bob Iger and if you're Disney, you pride yourself on the integrity of your company and on your relationship with that creative community. And I think the blowback was only going to snowball from there, right? And do you see, potentially canceled Disney Plus subscriptions in a material way? Do you see big creators not actually deciding or making a statement that they are not going to work with Disney? I mean, potentially. Back to your point about late night, though, Katie. Like, all things can be true here. It's definitely true that late night television is not a great business. You're not going to book any media executive on your show who's going to come forward and say, "Oh no, there's a bright future for late night." I mean, we are looking at in Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, and Stephen Colbert, whose show, of course, is also not coming back. We're looking at sort of the last generation of marquee late night hosts who are sort of household names in this country, or at least in parts of this country. That business is going away, but none of that negates the timeline that you brought up, which is that this happened because of FCC pressure, because of pressure from Nexstar and Sinclair, which clearly got the message about what Brendan Carr was saying and what it was that he wanted. And then because Disney, which is really stuck in this hard place, a lot of business leaders are trying to figure out how to navigate an administration that is brazenly transactional. Disney made the choice that it did. Now, can this become water under the bridge, right? Can you bring back Jimmy Kimmel and can you patch everything up? Maybe you're still going to have that pressure from the Trump administration, and we're going to see what he says on Tuesday night.
Well, so I'm interested in that angle of it, because I wonder if Bob Iger or other media executives have looked at the landscape and looked at just the unfolding events in the last few days and seen that capitulation or trying to get in good with the administration, it doesn't necessarily get them the ends that they're looking for. I mean, Donald Trump is still going after John Karl aggressively in the Oval Office or on the White House lawn, calling him a bad person, calling him a bad journalist, saying that he should get fired. I mean, it's not as if the pressure on media organizations or news organizations that are contained within these companies has lessened over the past few days.
No, that's absolutely right. And I'm going to borrow a line that I read somewhere. I'm sorry, you'll have to forgive me. I've been reading and listening to a lot about this, so apologies to the author because I forget where this came from. But if a bully comes for your lunch money and you give him your lunch money, that bully is not going to just go away and not come back the next day asking for more. That's not how that works. And if you look back and you say, okay, what was the first moment in Trump 2.0 when we saw a Hollywood executive or an entertainment executive show signs of capitulation to this administration? And it was Bob Iger. It was that $15 million settlement over the George Stephanopoulos lawsuit from Trump, plus $1 million for legal fees, that sort of set a standard for what the street price was for settling lawsuits that Trump brought against broadcast networks and against entertainment companies. Does anyone looking at the Kimmel situation right now and the pressure from Carr think that he got the monkey off of his back? Obviously, he did not.
No, I think I read that too. I want to say a version of it was Brian Stelter, but I think he was quoting somebody else. And I think there was an F-bomb contained in it that we can't say. We can say on It's Cable, but we're not going to out of, respect for the audience, clearly. Let's bring in a writer for Status, our friend Oliver Darcy, to this conversation. So, Oliver, I know you've been listening in. What else do you want to add? I
mean, I think this is a result of a lot of the backlash that Disney has faced. I don't know if they anticipated this much backlash, but they're obviously getting tremendous pressure from their customers, who are some of them canceling Disney Plus, and particularly from the Hollywood community. And so I think they were really left with no choice. I think at the end, Disney was probably working with Kimmel to desperately get him back on air as soon as possible, given the immense amount of scrutiny that they faced. And I'm not surprised that this happened, but I'm very curious, too, to see whether some of these local stations continue or take the program tomorrow night. We had seen the right-wing station owner Sinclair say that they wanted Jimmy Kimmel to apologize to Charlie Kirk's family and to also donate to Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA. I can't imagine that Jimmy Kimmel will do that, but how does Nexstar react if he doesn't? I think that's an open question we're going to figure out. I imagine Disney probably worked it out with them behind the scenes, but I'll be curious how they respond.
Yeah, that is a good point, Dylan. Before ABC made its decision, Sinclair, Nexstar took the show off the air. Is Disney speaking for them as well? Would they have coordinated this behind the scenes before they put him back on air?
Look, I don't know, and obviously this statement just came out recently, but what I would say is that if you are Bob Iger and Dana Walden at Disney, you are probably trying to think a few chess moves ahead. And you don't want to put yourself in a position now where you're going to war against the broadcasters, against Sinclair and, against Sinclair and Nexstar, right? That's not a good look either. What you're trying to do here is put out every fire across the board, and that means getting Sinclair and getting Nexstar on board before you put out an announcement like this, which my assumption is that that's where they netted out, but I can't be sure.
Do we know any of the numbers on how many folks were threatening Oliver to unsubscribe from Hulu? I mean, I know there's news articles about it, but what if there are any hard numbers, would we ever see them?
We never see them. But I mean, Howard Stern went on the air today and said he canceled his Disney Plus subscription as a result of this. And I've seen, obviously, a number of people post screenshots online saying they're canceling. So do we know how many? Is it a significant amount to hurt Disney's bottom line? Probably not. But, when you have someone like Howard Stern saying, I'm canceling in support of Jimmy Kimmel, that's a problem for Disney. And I think, usually the way these stories work is if you can see a little bit of the backlash in public-facing view, it's usually like 1,000 times worse behind the scenes. So I imagine Disney's been getting a lot of scrutiny from creatives saying, we want Jimmy Kimmel back on the air, and we don't want to do business with a company that throws someone under the bus for the Trump administration. It's a big problem for them, and so that's why you've seen them rush to get this deal done, I think. And I was thinking they wanted to get it done as soon as possible because this was creating a lot of problems behind the scenes.
I think it's also important just to briefly point out how we got here over the last several days, because the decision to take Jimmy Kimmel off the air sparked an incredibly swift and loud and expansive backlash. And we saw protesters show up outside Disney Studios in Burbank after Kimmel was suspended. We saw Disney start to actually lose subscribers. This is the Bob Iger calculation that Steph was talking about, and widespread calls to cancel memberships. I mean, even Howard Stern was among the chorus of people who said he was canceling his Disney subscription after Kimmel was taken off the air. 400 celebrities signed an open letter backing Kimmel, including Tom Hanks, Meryl Streep, and Jennifer Aniston. Former Disney CEO Michael Eisner ripped the company he devoted his life to and asked, where has all the leadership gone? Even Republican Senator Ted Cruz, again thanked in the monologue, and Rand Paul blasted the FCC chair's pressure campaign against ABC to get Kimmel sidelined. And so, in the face of all that pushback, Disney made the decision to put Kimmel back on the air. It's not done. Nearly a quarter of the stations, the local stations owned by big conglomerates, didn't air him tonight. But as we said at the top of the show, there was a very loud standing ovation. We're going to show you that now.
I've been hearing a lot about what I need to say and do tonight. And the truth is, I don't think what I have to say is going to make much of a difference. If you like me, you like me. If you don't, you don't. I have no illusions about changing anyone's mind. But I do want to make something clear because it's important to me as a human, and that is you understand that it was never my intention to make light of the murder of a young man. I don't think there's anything funny about it. I posted a message on Instagram on the day he was killed, sending love to his family and asking for compassion, and I meant it, and I still do. Nor was it my intention to blame any specific group for the actions of what it was obviously a deeply disturbed individual. That was really the opposite of the point I was trying to make. But I understand that to some that felt either ill-timed or unclear, or maybe both. And for those who think I did point a finger, I get why you're upset. If the situation was reversed, there's a good chance I'd have felt the same way. I have many friends and family members on the other side who I love and remain close to, even though we don't agree on politics at all. I don't think the murderer who shot Charlie Kirk represents anyone. This was a sick person who believed violence was a solution, and it isn't. Ever. And also, selfishly, I am a person who gets a lot of threats. I get many ugly and scary threats against my life, my wife, my kids, my coworkers because of what I choose to say. And I know those threats don't come from the kind of people on the right who I know and love. So that's what I wanted to say on that subject. But I don't want to make this about me because, and I know this is what people say when they make things about them, but I really don't. This show is not important. What is important is that we get to live in a country that allows us to have a show like this.
Starting us off this hour's Democratic Congressman Robert Garcia of California. He's the ranking Democrat on the House Oversight Committee. Thank you for being here with us. Let me just start by asking you, I played one clip of it. You probably watched the whole thing. What was your reaction to kind of some of what we heard from Jimmy Kimmel tonight, given the whirlwind of the last week?
Yeah, hey, Jen, I did watch the whole thing. I mean, pretty incredible. Obviously, not just the reception that he received from the audience. Clearly, he's emotional about what's happened, and I thought that his comments about Charlie Kirk were very heartfelt. I thought what stood out to me is just his direct attack and not holding back on what Chairman Carr and the FCC did and are trying to do. I mean, he called out President Trump's actions. He called out Brendan Carr. He made it clear that this is a moment in the country as it relates to freedom of speech that is under attack. And so he made a really robust defense of the First Amendment. He clearly was not holding back. The fact that he mentioned Carr by name and was very direct in what Brendan Carr is trying to do, I thought was very courageous. And in no way did Jimmy Kimmel hold back, or was he somehow reined in by ABC or his production team. That was what Jimmy Kimmel wanted to say. And so I really commend him. And I think the broader point, which I think tonight's actually a very remarkable moment as it relates to us as a country, but also as the media, those that are in the media, in really pushing back against Donald Trump and what he's trying to do. This was one of the most forceful, if not most forceful, reactions to Trump's overreach on the media and freedom of speech that we have seen. I think the country rallied behind Kimmel. Clearly, Disney was feeling it in the pocketbook. And so I really want to commend just Jimmy Kimmel, the decision by ABC. We have a lot of questions still, but this was a good night for freedom of speech.
Yeah, I keep thinking about what John Oliver said about if you give the bully your lunch money, he just comes back hungry, which is a very good analogy for the moment we're living in. So as you mentioned and just talked about, and this struck me too, he didn't mince words about Brendan Carr at all. I know this is top of mind for you too. I mean, you're obviously the ranking member on the Oversight Committee. The chairman agreed to invite him last week, invite Brendan Carr. Has anything happened with that? And what kind of outstanding questions do you have at this point? Jimmy Kimmel's back on the air, but about 20% of these the local affiliates didn't play Jimmy Kimmel because they're owned by Nexstar and Sinclair. So what questions do you have, and what's the latest on Brendan Carr coming to speak to your committee?
Yeah, we were essentially forcing a subpoena process through the Oversight Committee. Democrats were on Republicans. And so James Comer turned to me and said, hey, Will, we'll work on getting Brendan Carr here. He made a commitment to me. I reiterated that commitment publicly during the meeting. And so we are working to bring Mr. Carr in front of Oversight. We have a lot of questions. I mean, his remarks, what he has said prior to, of course, Jimmy Kimmel being yanked off the air, are outrageous and stunning and should concern every single American. And so having Carr in front of the Congress is going to be very important. And I expect, and we're going to demand, that James Comer keep his word, not just to me, but to the Republicans and Democrats on the committee as well. I mean, that is going to be incredibly important. And broadly speaking, we've already launched an investigation separate of that into what ABC and Sinclair and Nexstar and all of these companies are doing. Well, the idea right now that a conservative, obviously owner and a person that runs at least the Sinclair pieces of the network can make these decisions, knowing that they are in front of the government, of the Trump government, in trying to get this consolidation going. It's crazy. And I think most Americans are watching this going, what the hell is going on? And when you explain that you have these networks that are essentially trying to consolidate in front of the government, these are multi-billion-dollar deals. And you have, of course, ABC, which has interests in front of the government. And essentially, they are making decisions based on their bottom line, not actually on supporting the freedom of speech in the First Amendment. And so I think this is a good moment. I think a lot of Americans are learning a lot about FCC and what Trump is trying to do to silence his critics. And that for democracy is a really good thing.
Congressman Robert Garcia, you're right. Nobody knew who Brendan Carr was. Most people didn't. Some people did. But as of a week ago, now a lot of do, and you're going to be looking into it. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Okay, I'm bringing a few more people into the conversation. Joining me now is MSNBC senior White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, president and CEO of Media Matters Angela Carasone, and MSNBC columnist and political analyst Charlie Sykes. Okay, a lot to unpack here. I'm just going to start with you, Vaughn, because before Jimmy Kimmel even spoke, Donald Trump, who you've been covering for some time, posted this social media post where he essentially, we just have it up there on the screen, he essentially said the White House was told by ABC that his show was canceled, not something that was ever said publicly either, or that we know of privately, but that's what he says, and suggested he was going to go back and maybe sue them again. Tell us a little bit, to the degree you've heard, about what's going on in the White House right now, anything you've heard since Jimmy Kimmel's monologue.
He noted that Disney had already given him $16 million.
Yes, he did.
Right, and this is where it is very clear here. The capitulation does not get Donald Trump off of your back, right? Jimmy Kimmel said it tonight. He said they first pushed out Colbert, and then who do they turn to? They turned to Jimmy Kimmel. And he put up the post reminding folks that after Kimmel was taken off air and preempted, he explicitly said it's time for NBC now to take action against their late night host, saying he's going to continue to move in that direction here. And I think it's important context that here in Washington, D.C., people were not able to watch Jimmy Kimmel on their local ABC affiliate. Roanoke, your Little Rock, right? Seattle, Rochester, New York. I mean, the places that did not have access to this. And this was a decision here, clearly, by Jimmy Kimmel to take hold of this moment. And it was the line where he said that the president was unable to handle a joke about himself. So what did he do? He went and tried to fire hundreds of people from their job here. The president clearly wants Brendan Carr to continue to fight and clearly is threatening now a lawsuit to try to get him off air.
He keeps bringing up the $16 million repeatedly. He's brought it up at so many different press avails and to Jonathan Karl, exactly. Angela, let me bring you into here to this conversation, because I was asking Stephanie Ruhle about this earlier, just about 20%, 20 to 25%. You can tell me the exact number. I feel like of these local affiliates who are owned by Sinclair and Nexstar decided not to air Jimmy Kimmel tonight. There was very clear activism that people could take when they were angry last week when he was pulled off the air, right? People end your subscription to Disney or Hulu. There were protesters outside. It was more obvious. What should people, this is all over my social media feed and people asking me questions. What should people do now if they turned on their TV, they didn't see Jimmy Kimmel, they're frustrated, they're learning about these conglomerates?
Now it gets a lot more complicated, right? Because for a lot of people, just like they're learning about Brendan Carr, are probably learning about Sinclair and Nexstar, or at least hearing about them for the first time as well. Disney is a well-known brand. That means that people not only know it, but they have expectations about it. And when they do something that feels off, it's very easy to both respond in a high-valence way, a highly emotional way, and you know what to do. You complain to them. You try to get others to complain to them. It's a lot more complicated at the local level, and here's why. You have to know who your local station is. Now, you may know it. You may see it firsthand that they're owned by Sinclair or Nexstar. You may know that they're not carrying it tonight. You can complain to them, but they're not going to care necessarily. You have to really talk to their advertisers, and that's where things start to get prickly, because some of the advertisers are not really going to necessarily be affecting the bottom line. They might have bought national spots. You have to figure out who those advertisers are. Not all these groups have organized locally to be able to provide a list. So as you can see, it gets really complicated and convoluted. I think the important thing to do here is to keep putting the pressure on them. that they wanted. And here's why it matters. So you should, even though that Nexstar and Sinclair won't care directly, they need to have that record. Because ultimately, they actually have an obligation to be carrying Kimmel's show. There's an exception in these affiliate agreements that's in the public interest. And if you notice, Brendan Carr has been out there saying consistently, he's been using that buzzword, and it's not an accident. It's the one exception that these affiliates have that they can hide behind for not carrying the program without themselves getting in trouble for breach of contract. And so as long as the public is complaining and there's a really clear record there, it weakens their ability to say this is in the public interest because their own audiences, the own people that they're supposed to be serving with these broadcast licenses are complaining about it. So there's a lot of really complicated and convoluted things people could do, and they should. They should absolutely take action as much as they can. But the most important thing and the easiest thing they can do right now is complain to the station directly and make sure you do it either in writing, either by email or by social media so that there's a record of that. Because that record is going to matter in the next couple weeks as Disney starts to try to enforce their contract against the affiliates.